Hi, my name is Magdalena Kersting, and I'm really excited to be talking about teaching Einsteinian physics in schools today. I just quickly moved myself to the corner of the screen. So who am I? I am a physics educator and assistant professor of science education at the University of Copenhagen in Denmark. I am trained as a physicist and I did a PhD in physics education research. And here you can see my PhD thesis, in which I focused on modern or Einsteinian physics education. And I looked at the different ways we can teach general relativity in a secondary school. Here you can also see a part of a learning environment that we developed as part of this PhD project. And if you want to check it out, this is the URL, but I'm going to talk a little bit more about it in a minute. I am also the main editor of the book Teaching Einsteinian Physics in Schools, and our book was designed as a resource for teacher education students and physics teachers. So it was designed for you and really anyone interested in a scientifically accurate description of physical reality at a level appropriate for school education. And if you would like to learn more about the book, we have a live Q&A session that Chat Physics hosted with a few authors from our book. You can check it out on Chat Physics on the platform. We spent an hour discussing the book, discussing our experience of having taught Einsteinian physics in schools. And Jenny Bell also reviewed the book for Chat Physics. And I think she just expressed it so nicely because she said, teaching Einsteinian physics in schools is an epic collection of instructional approaches, thoroughly explained concepts and justifications for moving towards the teaching of special relativity, general relativity, and quantum physics in high schools. So if you would just like to learn more about the book, take a look at chatphysics.org. Okay, now you might be wondering, what is Einsteinian physics? Why should we teach it? And how can we teach it in the first place? So let's look at those questions one by one. First of all, what is Einsteinian physics? Well, Einsteinian physics really comprises our current best understanding of the universe, which means that Einsteinian physics is based on the two major theories of modern physics, the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics. So Einsteinian physics describes space-time and gravity at cosmic scales and the interaction of matter at subatomic scales. And we have chosen to call this Einsteinian physics, which is really a semantic convenience to contrast it with Newtonian physics. Because if we talk about classical physics, we often talk about Newtonian physics. And we wanted to emphasize that we are really looking at the modern Einsteinian paradigm of thinking about the world and doing physics. And since Albert Einstein had a fundamental role in developing both the theory of relativity and quantum mechanics, Einsteinian physics seems quite fitting and is catchy. Why should we teach Einsteinian physics? There are many good reasons for doing so, and I'd love to hear your favorite reasons. I just give you 3 today. And the first one is that from the Big Bang to black holes, from quantum cryptography to gravitational wave astronomy, Einsteinian concepts really define the way we look at the universe. So if you read something about physics in the news, chances are it is connected to these Einsteinian concepts. So there's really a need to equip students with a vocabulary and an understanding of these concepts, a vocabulary to talk about these concepts, to make sense of what's going on at the frontiers of physics and our knowledge these days. And here I really like a quote by Albert Einstein, who said, "Common sense is nothing more than a deposit of prejudices laid down in the mind before age 18. So the key idea is if we teach students Newtonian classical physics in schools, then they will struggle to really build a common sense that incorporates our current best understanding of the universe. Whereas if we introduce students from an early age to Einsteinian physics concepts, they will become familiar with these concepts and they will integrate these concepts into their common sense understanding of the world, which is a good idea. The next reason for teaching Einsteinian physics in schools is that these topics motivate students greatly, and there is much research out there. Here I have just collected a few research papers that show that Einsteinian physics topics greatly motivate students. Students tend to have better attitudes towards physics and science after going through Einsteinian physics interventions. They start imagining themselves or seeing themselves as someone who could do physics in the future. And I can't do justice to all the research there is, but I really invite you to take a look at some of those papers if you are interested in learning more about the motivational effects of Einsteinian physics education, or just get in touch with me. You can always get in touch with me. The third reason why I like Einsteinian physics in schools so much is that Einsteinian physics illustrates the nature of science. In recent years, the nature of science has become a part of many physics and science curricula around the world. And Einsteinian physics just offers so many great examples that illustrate why or how physics is a human endeavor, how we create knowledge, how we try to improve our knowledge, how we might, or how our knowledge production is shaped by society. So there is lots to explore, and here we can see a picture of a LIGO scientist, and I think the detection of gravitational waves is a superb example of how Einsteinian physics really pushes at the frontiers of our knowledge, while still showing that there's so much left to explore. Now that I have hopefully convinced you that it totally makes sense to teach Einsteinian physics in schools, let's look at how we can actually teach Einsteinian physics when we are in a classroom. And here I would like to show you the learning environment that my colleagues and I developed, which was part of my PhD project. You can find the link to those learning resources here. They are free. We have them both in Norwegian and in English. So take a look at them. And before we take a look at them together, I would like to say that we have developed these resources as part of a design-based research project, which means that we went through several iterations. We designed a pilot learning environment, then we tested and trialed it with teachers and students. They provided feedback. We improved the learning resources. We went out into schools again. So this was a 4-year project. And in the course of this project, we were guided by design principles, and we formulated design principles that really lay at the foundation of the learning resources. And I think it is nice to have heard about some of those design principles, because they will allow you to identify some of our design choices and our instructional approach to teaching Einsteinian physics in school in our actual learning resources. First of all, we try to emphasize how relativity relates to and sometimes breaks with classical physics, to help students see the continuity between some ideas of classical physics and Einsteinian physics, but also how Einsteinian physics really has changed our understanding about physics in fundamental ways and breaks with some of the ideas that seem to be self-evident in classical physics. And the second design principle is really central to the design of our learning resources, because we try to invite students to talk physics as often as possible. Talking physics means to use language orally and written exercises to discuss these ideas that seem so abstract, and discussing them using language helps building understanding of these abstract concepts. Not surprisingly, we use the history and the philosophy of physics to convey key ideas and create interest in Einsteinian physics. And we use thought experiments, analogies, visualizations, and a lot of the other good stuff to counteract the lack of experience with relativistic phenomena. So now we'll take a look at the resources, and let me just share the screen again. This is what our learning environment looks like. It is hosted by Viten.no, which is a Norwegian learning platform, but again, we have translated all resources to English. This is the main page of the learning environment. You will find a quick introduction. You and your students will find a quick introduction to get a better idea of what expects you in these resources. And then we have 3 modules. You can see how much time each module will take, more or less. We have one on the principle of equivalence, one on relativistic phenomena, and one on curved space-time. And there's a workbook in which students, or in which the tasks or the written responses from students are collected. You can mark them, and you can just learn a little bit more about the development of these resources. Let's take a quick look at some of the general way that we present our resources. This is the first module, the principle of equivalence, and each of our modules starts with the learning goals. So after completing this module, you and your students will be able to describe general relativity as a new theory of gravity. This is one of our learning goals, and throughout these resources, we will get back to key ideas, which are in these blue boxes, and there are also key ideas and concepts collected at the end of each module. So here, the first module is really all about the foundations of general relativity, what general relativity is. We have a writing task to ask students what they already know about gravity. There are videos. We describe why we need a new theory. So here we try to connect students' existing knowledge to the new ideas that Einstein proposed. We have a video here about Einstein's happiest thought experiment. So you get a general idea of what the resources look like. And again, since we want to invite students to talk physics as much as possible, each module has a summing up together box in which we provide some prompts and questions that we suggest can be discussed at the end of each lesson. So why did Einstein want to find a new theory of gravity in the first place? Why did we need a new theory of gravity? What was wrong with Newton's theory of gravity? Or then something like, imagine you are in a small room without windows. Will you be able to detect if the room is inside an accelerating rocket in outer space, or if it's just resting on Earth? And of course, here we return to some of the thought experiments that we have introduced earlier. If students or you would like to want more, there are additional resources, and it's just really fun to work with these resources and browse through them. The next module is on relativistic phenomena, and here gravity is seen from 2 points. I think this is a nice exercise that shows again how we invite students to talk physics. We have this concept cartoon in which 2 students discuss an aspect of the theory of relativity. And we asked students to use their knowledge in physics to discuss these two statements and to write down a short summary of their discussion. And then we asked them which perspective do they prefer, Einstein's or Newton's, because both can seem pretty weird and mysterious if you think about it. Finally, I think I'm probably short on time, so let me just quickly show you my favorite module. It's the one on curved space-time, which I feel is the most exciting part of the theory of relativity. Here we introduce students to the idea that gravity is not a force, but it's actually a geometric phenomenon. And to make sense of this idea, how the geometry of our universe relates to relativity, we first introduced the notion of space-time. And then we have a series of interactive animations where we start with a task on a world map, and then we compare the geometry of curved, or we compare the geometry of maps which represent a part of the curved surface of the Earth to the way that we think about curved space-time. So it's a really nice series of exercises where we first introduce the idea of geodesic curves as the straightest or shortest path between 2 points. And then again, we contrast and compare Newton and Einstein's understanding of gravity. And there's a little quiz, there are more discussions, and then we have another thought experiment and really try to introduce students to the idea of how we can understand gravity as the geometry of curved space and warped time. Take a look at it. If you have questions, just get in touch with me. So there's a lot of fun things to explore. And yeah, here we have a little bit of history of physics again. So I just invite you to take a look at these resources.